Dear students, today we are reading Birth, a story written by A.J. Cronin. This is chapter 7 from our book Snapshots. We already met Dr. Andrew Manson. He is a young doctor who just began his medical practice in the small Welsh mining town of Blenley. He is approached by John Morgan. John Morgan is Susan Morgan's husband. He is the miner, a driller, and he approaches Dr. Andrew Manson to help him in the delivery of his wife. Dr. Andrew Manson is putting much labor in the delivery because mother is in a critical condition. The mother requires much attention before she is revived. Further, the baby was not breathing at birth. So using all his knowledge and intuition, Dr. Andrew Manson makes more efforts to revive the child. He recalls one similar case from before, and he decides to begin his special method of respiration. He gets 2 basins and he splashes some cold water into one basin and he puts some water into another one. He mixes cold and hot water and he starts plunging the baby. He starts immersing the baby first into the icy water and then into the steaming bath in order to revive the baby. 15 minutes passed. Sweat was now running into Andrew's eyes, blinding him. One of his sleeves hung down, dripping. His breath came pantingly, but no breath came from the lax body of the child. Dr. Andrew Manson was trying to revive the child. So 15 minutes passed. After 15 minutes, he was tired. Sweat was now running into Andrew's eyes, blinding him. He was sweaty, and this sweat was blinding him. He could not see. One of his sleeves hung down, dripping. Since he was plunging the baby first into the icy and then into the hot water, one of his sleeves was dripping. It was wet. His breath came pantingly. To pant means to breathe heavily. He was breathing heavily, but no breath came from the lax body of the child. Lax body refers to seemingly lifeless or dead. There was no breath coming from the lax body of the child. The baby was not breathing. A desperate sense of defeat pressed on him, a raging hopelessness. A desperate sense of defeat. Desperate referring to hopeless sense as feeling, some hopeless feeling of defeat, of failure. This feeling pressed on him. This was a feeling of raging hopelessness. A raging hopelessness refers to fierce disappointment. He was very disappointed that even after such a long time, the baby was still not breathing. He felt the midwife watching him in stark consternation, while there, pressed back against the wall where she had all the time remained, her hand pressed to her throat, uttering no sound, her eyes burning upon him, was the old woman. He remembered her longing for a grandchild, as great as had been her daughter's longing for this child, all dashed away now, futile, beyond remedy. After some time, Dr. Andrew Manson felt the midwife watching him. The midwife was not taking part in Dr. Andrew Manson's attempt to revive the baby. She was watching him in stark consternation. Stark means evident. Consternation refers to some feeling of anxiety. The midwife was looking at the doctor with a feeling of some dismay or anxiety. She was there, pressed back against the wall, where she had all the time remained. Means she was not helping at all. She had her hand pressed to her throat, uttering no sound. Uttering means making or producing no sound. She was completely silent, her eyes burning upon him. It means her eyes were fixed upon him. She was looking at him. She had her hand pressed to her throat, and she was leaning against the wall. She was not helping. He remembered the old woman, Susan Morgan's mother, and he remembered her longing for a grandchild, her desire for a grandchild, and that desire was as great as her daughter's desire. They both wanted this baby very much. All dashed away now, futile, beyond remedy. All dashed away now means all is finished. Everything is gone. It is ruined. Futile, beyond remedy. Futile means vain or fruitless, producing no result. Beyond remedy means that nothing can be done to make it better. It is incurable, beyond recall, irreparable. Everything is ruined now. Everything is finished. All dashed away now. Futile, beyond remedy. In vain and incurable, irreparable. The floor was now a draggled mess. Draggled means dirty and wet. It was all dirty and wet because doctor was immersing the baby into one basin and then into the other. So everything was wet and dirty. The floor was now a draggled mess. Stumbling over a sopping towel, Andrew almost dropped the child, which was now wet and slippery in his hands, like a strange white fish. So Dr. Andrew Manson was still holding the baby. The floor was in a mess. Everything was wet and dirty. And he stumbled. To stumble means to trip over. He tripped over a sopping towel. Sopping means drenched, wet. He tripped, he lost balance, and he almost fell over a drenched, wet towel. And he almost dropped the child. He almost let go of the child, which was now wet and slippery. The child was wet and slippery because he was immersing the child into water. The child was wet and slippery. It was difficult to hold firmly on because it was wet. And the baby was like a strange white fish. White because the baby was not breathing. It was pale. "For mercy's sake, doctor," whimpered the midwife. "It's stillborn." The midwife is convinced that the baby is stillborn. And she is telling the doctor, "For mercy's sake." It means, "Oh, please, for heaven's sake, doctor." She whimpers. To whimper means to whine or cry, to make some sounds expressing pain or helplessness or fear. She was whining, she was crying, and she was saying it is stillborn. It is dead. Andrew did not heed her. To heed means to pay attention to or to take notice of. He did not listen to her. Beaten, despairing, having labored in vain for half an hour, he still persisted in one last effort. He was very tired, beaten, and hopeless, despairing. Having labored means having worked in vain, uselessly, for half an hour. For half an hour he was uselessly trying and trying to revive the baby. And he was hopeless, but he still persisted in one last effort. He still carried on with one last thing, one last effort. Rubbing the child with a rough towel, crushing and releasing the little chest with both his hands, trying to get breath into the limp body. This was his last effort. He was rubbing the child, he was stroking the child with a rough towel, with a harsh towel, crushing and releasing the little chest. Means he was pressing the child's chest in order to revive the child, trying to get breath into that limp body. Limp body refers to motionless. The body was motionless. And then, as by a miracle, the pygmy chest, with his hands enclosed, gave a short, convulsive heave. Another and another. Andrew turned giddy. Then, suddenly, a miracle happened. As by a miracle, the pygmy chest, pygmy refers to small or very small. Pygmy is used to refer to something much smaller than its kind. So this little chest suddenly gave a short, convulsive heave. Convulsive means jerky or producing or consisting spasms or jerks, convulsions. It started moving. It gave a short, convulsive heave. Heave means breath. And then another and another. Andrew turned giddy. He was unsteady. He was very surprised. He was dizzy. The sense of life springing beneath his fingers after all that unavailing striving was so exquisite it almost made him faint. The sense of life means the feeling of life which he could hear moving, springing beneath his fingers because he was holding the child. He could feel the child moving. After all that unavailing striving, it means after all that ineffective great efforts. Unavailing refers to ineffective or achieving little or nothing. Striving refers to great efforts. After all these great efforts which gave no results, he was feeling the life beneath his fingers. The baby was moving, and that feeling was so exquisite, so special, so extremely beautiful and delicate. It almost made him faint. He almost fainted. He almost lost consciousness. He was very surprised that the baby is alive. He redoubled his efforts feverishly. He redoubled his efforts means he started working twice as hard. He was trying really hard. Feverishly. Feverishly means hectic or frenzied, with a lot of energy, with a lot of enthusiasm. He was redoubling his effort. He was working much harder with a lot of energy to revive the child. The child was gasping now, deeper and deeper. Gasping means the child was now breathing hard. To gasp means to pant or to breathe hard. Deeper and deeper. A bubble of mucus came from one tiny nostril, a joyful, iridescent bubble. This was a sign of life. A bubble of mucus, a bubble of liquid or secretion came from the nose, from one of the tiny nostrils. A joyful, iridescent bubble. Iridescent means sparkling. There was this shiny bubble which came out of one of the nostrils. Iridescent means that it's caused by the reflection of light. Bubbles can sometimes reflect the light. So one of these bubbles, which came out of the tiny nozzle, was shiny. It was sparkling. The limbs were no longer boneless. The limbs means hands and legs were no longer boneless. They didn't seem boneless anymore. The head no longer lay back spinelessly. Spinelessly means loosely or without spine. The head was not hanging anymore. It was not looking as if there is no spine. The head was not hanging anymore. The blanched skin was slowly turning pink. Blanched means having been briefly immersed in hot water. This blanched skin was now turning healthy pink. Then, exquisitely, came the child's cry. Exquisitely means extremely beautiful, exquisitely. Then something magnificent happened. The baby started crying. There came the child's cry. This little baby, who was very pale, started turning pink, and then it started crying. Dear Father in heaven, the nurse sobbed hysterically. It's come alive. Now the nurse is very surprised and she says, Dear Father in heaven. It means she is very surprised. Oh heavens, she says, sobbing. Sobbing means crying. She was crying and shouting hysterically. It's alive, it's come alive. Andrew handed her the child. He felt weak and dazed. Dr. Andrew Manson handed her the child. He gave her the child. He felt very confused, very weak and dazed. Dazed means confused or perplexed. About him, the room lay in a shuddering litter. About him means around him. Around him, the room lay in shuddering litter. It means the room was a total mess. Shuddering litter means total mess. There were blankets, towels, basins, soiled instruments, the hypodermic syringe impaled by its point into the linoleum. Being so tired after trying to revive the baby, he handed the baby to the nurse. He felt very weak and confused. He looked around, and around him the room was in total mess. There were blankets, towels, basins, some soiled instruments. Soiled means dirty or stained. They were all lying scattered around. And there was this hypodermic syringe impaled. Impaled means it was stuck. It was stuck on its side in the floor, in the linoleum. Linoleum means a material covering the floor. So this syringe was stuck in the floor. The ewer, this large jug, was knocked over. It was fallen. It was turned upside down. The kettle on its side in a puddle of water. There was a puddle of water on the floor, and the kettle for warming the water, it was lying on its side. It was also fallen, and it was lying in a puddle of water. The whole floor was very messy, wet and dirty. Upon the huddled bed, the mother still dreamed her way quietly through the anesthetic. Upon the huddled bed means upon this cozy bed. Huddled refers to something which is standing or sitting close together, like crowded. We could say, in this cozy bed, where there were many things, the mother was still sedated. The mother still dreamed her way quietly through the anesthetic. She was still under the anesthesia. The old woman still stood against the wall. The woman was still standing against the wall, but her hands were together. Her lips moved without sound. She was praying. The woman who was leaning against the wall was now praying. Her hands were together and she was praying. Mechanically, Andrew wrung out his sleeve, pulled on his jacket. Mechanically means automatically. Automatically, he wrung out his sleeve, pulled on his jacket. To wring out means to twist a cloth or a piece of clothing with your hands to remove water from it or to squeeze the water out. He was wringing out his sleeve and he pulled on his jacket. He put the jacket on. He said, "I'll fetch my bag later, nurse. I will take my bag later." He went downstairs, through the kitchen, into the scullery. His lips were dry. At the scullery, he took a long drink of water. He reached for his hat and coat. So Dr. Andrew Manson went downstairs, through the kitchen, into the scullery. Scullery is a room for washing dishes and for similar work. It is a room where people store dishes and utensils. So he went down, he took a long drink of water, and he took his hat and coat. He was ready to leave. Outside, he found Joe, standing on the pavement with a tense, expectant face. Outside the house, there was Joe Morgan. He was standing on the pavement with a tense, expectant face. Tense referring to some worry. He was uneasy. He was feeling agitated, worried, and uneasy. His face was expectant, means he was having this eager look on his face. He was excited to hear the news. "All right, Joe," he said thickly. "Both all right." Thickly means he was saying in a hard voice. It was hard to understand what he was saying, but he said, "All right, Joe, both all right. Both of them are all right." It was quite light, nearly 5 o'clock. It was almost 5 o'clock. A few miners were already in the streets, the first of the night shift moving out. Dr. Andrew is leaving the place, and he says a few miners were already in the streets, the first of the night shift moving out. This was the first shift that he met. A few miners. As Andrew walked with them, spent and slow, his footfalls echoing with the others under the morning sky, he kept thinking blindly, oblivious to all other work he had done in Blenley. "I've done something. Oh God, I've done something real at last." So as he is leaving the place, Dr. Andrew meets few miners. This is the first of the night shift moving out. As he walked with them, spent and slow. Spent referring to tired. He was very tired and he was slow. His footfalls means his Sounds, the sounds made by feet while walking. These sounds were echoing with the others, with the other miners who were passing under the morning sky, because it was getting bright. He kept thinking blindly, oblivious to all other work he had done in Blenley. Oblivious means unaware or mindless. He was unaware of everything else. He was oblivious to all other work he had done in Blenley. And he said, I've done something, oh God. I've done something real at last. So Dr. Andrew's frantic efforts succeeded. He made a strong effort to save both the mother and the baby. And it's really a tough job to focus on anyone because he had to focus on both the lives. So when he got success in it, he uttered, I have done something. Oh God, I have done something real at last. Because it felt like something really big, something really important. And he felt satisfied that as a doctor he did something real. As we could see, the midwife in the story remained doubtful. She had doubts about the young doctor's abilities, and she was quite pessimistic about the child's survival. Her act of keeping the child under the bed shows that she never believed that the doctor would be able to revive the child at any stage. And later on as well, she tells him, it is stillborn. Joe Morgan as well is waiting outside. He's quite anxious and he decides to wait outside. He keeps walking up and down. Another person who was there was Susan Morgan's mother. She's giving all her hopes in Dr. Andrew. And at the end, when Dr. Andrew manages to revive the baby, she's there, standing against the wall, and she's praying silently. Dear students, I hope you like the story. Today we have finished Birth, written by A.J. Cronin. Have a nice day and see you soon.